Hey, welcome back. I don't have a cute montage video of getting ready for you this morning. It's just me. So let me start with a silly question. What's your favorite sports team? Frankly, this year I'm less excited than I normally am about the Super Bowl coming up next week. But my favorite sports team going way back has been the Raiders. I don't know if you guys follow professional football or not. I know a couple of you do. The Raiders consistently are not great, but their fan base is big time for them. And when they do pull it out and they do win, and we've got a couple Super Bowl rings. When they do pull it out and they do win, they are the underdogs to win. They are the ones people are excited about. It means that next year, they're bottom of the list. They'll get first pick, so maybe next year they'll have a good team. I don't know. This morning, the sermon is entitled King of the Comebacks. And you're going to see two examples where we get to see the king of the comeback in Jesus and in Peter. So if you guys will get your Bibles, grab your cup of coffee, sit down, get comfortable. We'll start this morning. This morning we're in Luke 22, verses 54 through 62. And then we'll have another verse here at the end. But Luke 22, chapter 54 starts like this. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him to the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there by the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This is the man that was with him." But Peter denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "Oh, yes, you are. You are the one." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord had been spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. So a lot has happened leading up to this, especially since last week. Last week, Peter told Jesus that I know who you are. And he said, you are the Messiah, the living Son of God. And Jesus said, you are exactly who I say you are. You're the rock. You're the rock I'm going to build my church on. Later, as they're coming up to the time before Jesus gets arrested, Jesus says to Peter, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." But he replied, "Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death." And Jesus said to him, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you even knew me." Then Jesus asked them, "When I sent you without purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" "Nothing," they answered. Peter knew who he was. Peter knew who Jesus knew that he was. But still, Peter is insistent that I am not going to let anything bad happen to my best friend. I believe that. I believe that Peter thought of Jesus as his best friend because I believe that was true. I believe that he solely relied on him, as it says there, "Did you ever want for anything?" And they said no. Peter also, when they go to arrest Jesus, he takes out a sword and he cuts off the high priest's ear, and Jesus puts it back on. But he is so passionate and so ready to defend what he knows to be true that he missed the point a little bit completely. I think we all do this from time to time. I think we get so excited about what's going on or so impassioned about our little project that we kind of miss the point. Because Jesus tells him that even before the sun rises in the morning, you're going to disown me. So Peter, he's following around behind. He doesn't want to get caught up in all the mess again. He doesn't want to have to pull out his sword again, I guess. settles by a fire, and a young woman sees him and says, this is the man that was with him. He says, woman, I don't know him. Peter immediately, it hasn't even really been that long that he was told that you're going to deny me, immediately turns around and denies him. Well, I imagine Peter must have thought this is a fluke at this point. Like, the sun's going to come up any minute. Like, Jesus is going to be wrong for the first time ever. He continues on, and someone else says to him, you are also one of them. He says, man, I am not. I love this. Even in the NIV, it's like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Like he tried to play it off cool or tried to be all nonchalant about it or something. I imagine just as the words came out of his mouth, the rooster crowed. It's like no sooner did he say, man, I don't even know him, but off in the distance. Says he remembered the word of the Lord had spoken to him. And the Lord looked straight at Peter, and he remembered, before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. Have you ever been owed a really big I told you so? Have you ever done something that somebody said not to do, and you were really owed a big I told you so? Have you ever given an I told you so to someone else who deserved it? Have you ever not given an I told you so to someone who really deserved it? How about you? Have you been owed a big I told you so and it just never came? I've talked about before about admiring my dad for having the heart of God because of a few things. And it was just showing up when I was really owed a big I told you so more than once. And just not giving it to me. I almost wanted it. And we're going to see Peter do this himself in a minute. I almost wanted that I told you so. I almost wanted that tongue lashing, that berating. I wanted him to tell me how dumb I had been so I could just admit it to myself. But he didn't do that. He just told me the truth. He just told me who I was. I am his son, and nothing is going to change that. Our world runs on I told you so's. Why did X happen? Because why? Because I told you Y was going to happen if X happened. I was a physics major. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. If you push something, something is going to push back. If you don't push back, that is going to continue to move forward the way that it is happening. That is, I told you so. That is the laws of nature. I told you so. We want that. We want that equal but opposite reaction sometimes. We want to be told that we screwed up. We want to kind of be tripped up. Sometimes that sinking feeling that we talked about with the walking on the water, sometimes we like to hit the absolute bottom first. Because we know if we can get to that absolute bottom, there's nowhere to go but up from there. We know at that point, I definitely screwed up. We use that rock bottom to propel ourselves back up to the top. Instead of just shouting out for help when we need it the first time. In that story, in a lot of Peter's stories, I think Jesus could have given him a really big I told you so. But he doesn't. He just acts like Jesus and he says, I know who you are. And this isn't it. Come on, keep following me, keep walking, keep going. See a recurring theme going on here? Work in progress, continue to go, drive forward, work. This isn't a destination, but that drive to continue to grow kind of is the destination, if that makes sense. We want to be chastised a little bit. I gotta keep coming back to this. We want to be told, I told you so. And right here, we're going to see one of the biggest needs for I told you so, coming from the original king of the comeback, Jesus. So Jesus sets a series of events off in Peter's life, starting back with just renaming him the Rock. Instead of exploring what Jesus meant by this, Peter set out to prove that he was worthy of the title of being the rock that Jesus was going to build his church on. I think he could have meant that very literally and physically, that Peter was going to lay the foundation that was going to eventually become the church. But I think he also meant that spiritually and internally, you have the solidness, you have the grit that it's going to take to build this church. God takes this risk every time he invites us into partnership with him. Like he invites us to be a part of this really great thing, and now we have to prove that we deserve that in some way. And Peter takes every opportunity that he can to prove to Jesus that he is who he thinks he is. Remember, this is sort of the secondary recurring theme here. Who do you think I am? Who am I to you? Peter wants to prove this to Jesus over and over again. And he does some great things to do this. Walking on water is the first one that we really talked about, but this is great. I think dropping the nets and following him was a really big first step. Walking on water was that faith being put into action, but a little bit of it, I think, was him just wanting to prove to Jesus that he was who he thinks he is. The other one, the declaration of him saying that he was the Messiah, this is like the teacher's pet that jumps up and says like, ooh, I know the answer, but then turns around and kind of like gets it wrong anyway and still wants to argue with the teacher about it. He wants to prove so bad that he is who Jesus says that he is. Even later, when Jesus is washing their feet, he says, don't wash my feet, wash all of me. Like, I don't want to just do this little thing. I want to do the big thing. Like, if you're going to wash my toe, you might as well wash my whole body, because that's how much I want to be what you think I am. He is so intent on being the protector and the rock and the solid foundation for Jesus that he cuts a dude's ear off, who is ultimately just setting off a chain of events that is going to lead to Jesus' ultimate sacrifice. If he knew he was essentially standing in the way of that, would he have done that? But I think what Peter really saw as his ultimate failure, denying Jesus 3 times, what he saw as his ultimate failure was really just Jesus giving him a chance to go find himself again. He knew immediately this wasn't him. This wasn't some test to get Peter to pass, so he could qualify to be who he said that he was. This denial, it didn't define him going forward. It didn't go on his win-loss sheet. It wasn't permanently written down onto his reputation forever. Jesus gives a general declaration to the whole crew and says, you guys are going to scatter like rabbits. And then Peter pushed back. He said, no, I can do it. I can stand up. These other guys might run away, but I'm going to be the one who's standing beside you. I might even get up on the cross with you. He declared that he was going to be able to prove himself. And then Jesus went into specifics. He said, specifically, you are going to deny me 3 times. This left Peter no room for excuses. It left the scenario where there was no way that he was ever going to be able to ignore it or miss the point. This was going to happen, and it did happen. In the end, Peter owned his powerlessness. He owned his weakness. He owned the thing that he felt was making him less than worthy. And he knew now that Jesus also clearly saw that. But he didn't quite know yet whether or not that was going to leave him with the inability to be embraced and loved by Jesus. Peter's denial of Jesus was an essential part of his moral development, maturation. He aggressively worked his plan until his plan didn't work for him anymore. And only then was he ready to link arms with Jesus and start the church. He couldn't have willingly walked and waited in the upper room if he'd still been trying to prove himself. But with the upper room, I'm getting way too ahead of myself. Right now, let's go back where we started, because that's what Peter does. Peter stops here and he goes back where he started. He goes back to fishing. I would think he even goes back to that exact same shore. He spends quite a few days there. He goes back to that same shore. And then in John 21, 1 through 19, we see something really cool happen. And I want you guys to read this with me and really let the words sink in. So again, we're in John 21, 1 through 19. And Jesus, like I said before, the king of the comebacks, he has already come back. He has died. He's been crucified. He was buried for 3 days. He rose again, and he is back. He is back to do the final piece, to really implant that final cornerstone into what was going to be his kingdom going forward. It's interesting to me, and it's a little funny to me, I guess, as someone who identifies with Peter a lot, with being a little hard-headed, with being a little quick to talk and slow to think. It's funny to me that even in Peter's failure, even in him going back to what he started at in the first place, even just going back as though none of this had ever happened, Jesus knew he wasn't going to be able to build his kingdom without this piece. It makes those of us that feel left out or excluded or unique, chronic uniqueness, makes them feel special, makes it feel important. Jesus makes that important because he walks 80 miles to get back to where Peter is. It's interesting. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. 21. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, James and John. The 2 other disciples were there together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the nets in because of the large number of fish. Let's stop right there for a second. Jesus makes a joke here. I love it. I love the personality of Jesus. He jokes to them. Aren't you guys catching anything? No, we're not. And then he makes the throwback, almost as a clue to who he is. Put your nets on the other side. This goes back to where we started. The whole story goes back to where we started. And it's going to end in a really similar place to where we started. 7. Then the disciple whose Jesus loved, John, said to Peter, it's the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for there was not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire burning, and the coals were there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore, and it was full of large fish, 153 fish. It's funny they go so specific there. But even with so many in the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast with me. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, he took the bread, he gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Stop right there again. I went to a youth conference my senior year of high school, and we did something that was really impactful to me and really interesting to me. I'd done communion 100 times at this point. It had kind of become a thing of just knowing exactly what to do, but not thinking about the meaning of it all the time necessarily. But what we did was we went on the coast of Texas, and we did a fish fry. And we talked about this story and talked about it almost being like a second communion that they had here. I don't know that we always talk about this story enough. This is the story of Peter's comeback. He jumped out of the boat because the boat wasn't going to get there fast enough. He thought he could swim faster to get to Jesus. And when he got there, I imagine him falling into his arms with excitement. And right here, Jesus owed him a huge, I told you so. But he didn't give it to him. He just said, come on, guys, let's have breakfast. Immediately, he reminded them who they were by partaking in this assimilation of the communion that they had already shared together, the Last Supper that they had already shared together, breaking the bread and passing it out to them. With all of these fish, almost being a callback to, I'm going to make you fishers of men. There's speculation. People say that 153 is how many people were ultimately converted during the ministry so far, and that's why they were so specific with that number. I just think it was a lot of fish, and they took the time to sit there and count them, but who knows? After breakfast was done, in verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Then Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all the things that you know, and you know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Verily, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you're old, you're going to stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. He does it again. That was all that he did the first time they met, was say, follow me. Become a fisher of men. Drop your nets and follow me. And he's making a callback to it again right here. Something kind of interesting happens right after this, because I'm a little caught up with Peter and John's sibling rivalry they've almost got going on, where it's like, I can say that about him, but you can't say that about him. Because Peter turned and saw the disciple who Jesus loved, John, was following them. And this is the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and said, Lord, who is going to betray you? So Peter saw him and he asked, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what's that have to do with you? You just follow me. I think that's really funny. I think that even in his moment of redemption, even in his moment of utterly coming back to him, even in this moment of being on his knees and begging for forgiveness, as it was, he's told that when you get older, You're going to die. You're going to do things you don't want to do, but you're going to do them for me. And his first thought is to look at this friend of his, probably one of the ones that he was the closest with, because it seems like they've got this sort of tit-a-tat rivalry going on. And says, what about him? Just says, don't worry yourself with him. How often do we get caught up with worrying about other people? How often do we sit in the church and go, what about him? What about them? Or, man, that'd be a really good sermon for that guy. And how often do we need Jesus to just say, what does that have to do with you? What is that any of your business? You follow me. This last chapter is written sort of as an epilogue. He signs it off in verse 20 with, what's the purpose of John's gospel? By saying, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. If John's gospel left off right there, I think it would have been okay. I think the story would have still been good, right? Just like if Peter would have sat down and said, Jesus has got this on the boat, it still would have been a story about faith. If Peter had not followed Jesus, it still would have been a story about transformation. If Peter had not denied Jesus, he probably still would have scurried off like everybody else. I think if John's gospel stopped right there, it would still be a story about Jesus coming back to life. It would still be a story about Jesus's redemptive, sacrificial salvation and love. But they add this epilogue to the end. He adds this little story. It says, Jesus did many other things as well, and if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. How beautiful. John's a little bit of a poet. As you'll see in many other books that he's written, he's a little bit of a poet. He likes to say things in a pretty way. If I wrote down everything that Jesus did, all the books in the world could not contain it. That's wild. But what he thought was important to write down, this is why I know that they had a brotherly rivalry, not a real hatred for each other. He knew that writing this story down was important. Before it and after it, he says, he did so many other things, I couldn't contain them. But he knew it was important to write this chapter. Two interesting things here. Jesus doesn't call Peter here. He calls him Simon. He calls him by his real name. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if there's significance in that or if he just wanted to look him in the eye and speak to who he was, or if in returning to what he had done, he became Simon again for a minute. It'd be interesting to see it end with him calling him Peter after calling him by his old name. Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And I imagine that first time, it was a snap reaction. Yes, of course I love you. Then feed my sheep. The second time he asked him, I imagine it had to hit him a little bit harder. I can almost see him saying, look, I know what you're really asking, and I'm so sorry. But yes, of course I love you. Then feed my sheep. He asked him a third time, do you love me? And this time it broke Peter's heart. Have any of you ever had kids or friends or something that maybe less than honest at times? And you've got to ask them multiple times? My kids are a little bit like that. Their snap reaction may be not a full truth, But when you ask them a second time, they've either got to double down on that lie or they've got to admit that they were wrong. That's what I think a little bit is going on with Peter here. Jesus is asking him again, asking him to kind of double down on saying, yes, I love you, but also double down on admitting that is who I am so much more than the man who's sitting in that fishing boat. That is who I am so much more than anything else I'm ever going to do. I am a man who loves you. And because of that, I am going to feed your sheep. The third time he asks him, it breaks Peter's heart. He was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. He said, Lord, you know all things, and you know I love you. And in the message it says, Master, you know everything that there is to know. You have got to know that I love you. I imagine here, like we were talking before, I think Peter wanted the rebuke. I think he wanted to hear Jesus say, you hurt me. I think he wanted to hear Jesus say, you failed. I think he wanted to hear Jesus say, go away, but I'm inviting you back. I think he wanted it to be Jesus's idea more than he wanted it to be his idea. And Jesus had other plans. Jesus intends for us to come to him willingly and knowingly, and he just asks us, do you love me? And offers a simple request afterwards. Feed my sheep comes in different versions for everybody. Feed my lambs, look after the people that need to know what real Christ-like love looks like. And frankly, we don't always do a great job at it. But Peter's story is our story. Peter's story is a story of restoration and relentless love, of a recalling back to who we are every day. Peter's story is a story about community, second, third, fourth chances. That Jesus is going to find you in your despair, even if you've regressed, even if you've disappointed him, even if you've hurt him. He's going to find you where you are and just ask you, do you love me? Jesus finds us. He finds us in our shame and in our failures, and he still chooses us. Just like when he chose Peter on this same shore 3 or 4 years earlier. This week's message is a message of hope. And right now, I feel like our world needs a message of hope. I think we need to know that in our lowest time, Jesus comes and finds us. Even when we don't think that we are who he thinks we are, he comes and finds us. Even when the ugly parts of the world are definitely not acting like the kind of people that Jesus wants in his kingdom, Jesus is still seeking us out. He is still seeking them out. It's still our job to seek them out. It's still our job to pray for them, and it's still our job to love them. This is Jesus reinstating Peter, and next week's going to be a really big one. It's going to be the start of a phase 2 of this revolution. Peter's story doesn't end here. And I think that's the most miraculous part of this. Peter's story doesn't end here. Something even bigger happens in just a month. So next week, hopefully we're in person, and hopefully I can share with you there. If not, I'll be right back here in my makeshift office. I love you guys, and I hope you were able to join us this morning. Please share this video with friends. Comment down in the comment box. prayer requests or praises or anything you've got going on. I'd love to be able to read them and hear them. And that engagement drives up more and more people being able to see the video and being able to hear what I hope today was a good message of hope. Dear Lord, thank you. Thank you for a beautiful day, whether it's pretty or rainy or snowy or cold or beautiful and sunny and warm. We are always just grateful and say thank you for the days that you've given us, for the ability to wake up every morning, for the ability to put a smile on my face in spite of the storm. God, I thank you for making us like Peter, or choosing someone who is so much like us, someone who wants so hard to be what you see them as, but just continues to slip up in that pursuit. God, I think that the pursuit is part of the journey, and I think it's part of the destination, but I think that wanting you, that seeking you, is always number one and always important. Above all the rules, above everything else, I know, God, that you just want us to seek you, and you want us to want what you want for our lives more than we want what we want for our lives. That seems like an easy prayer, but it's a hard life to live sometimes. Be with us and keep us safe throughout the rest of this week. Keep the words here of Jesus, your Son, you, in our hearts and minds throughout this week. Do you love me? Then feed my lambs. Do you love me? Then do the things I've taught you to do. Do you love me? Then go be fishers of men. God, I thank you for the healing that we've seen through people in this church. And I thank you for the comfort that you provided in the sad times and in the hard times that we've had recently, God. God, I thank you for family and friends and the ability to just rejoice and gather close together when things are hard, God. There's a certain beauty in pain, and I know that I'm the kind of person that loves to sit in that a little bit, but God, I thank you for the comfort that you find us in the gutters, and you find us in the mud, and you find us in the boats and the fishing nets and the lives that we think we know, but you know who we are better, God. God, just keep us loving you and loving each other every day, and bring us back rejoicing. Amen. Thank you. I can't wait to see you next week.